All right, everybody. Hi, happy to be here. My name's Hart Lambur. I'm the founder of UMA, and I'll try to keep this energetic and lively for our post-lunchtime session. I wanted to give a talk on what we call an optimistic oracle, or our optimistic oracle design, and give some background on why we think this sort of human-powered truth machine is really an important piece of Web3 technology, an important primitive we need in the space. And I do want to keep this like interactive. If anybody has a question along the way, try to flag me down. Happy to answer it. I'll also take questions at the end. So let's start with the dumb question. Like, what does an oracle actually do here? We're at an oracle conference. We probably all know. I just want to make the point that I think a common misconception is that oracles are meant to relay price data onto a blockchain. I think this is an incomplete definition. I'm really of the opinion that an oracle is a truth machine that's meant to record truths about the world, about what's happening outside of a blockchain, onto that structure. And these truths can be a lot more nuanced or a lot richer than simply like, what's the price of Bitcoin, what's the price of Ethereum? These truths can include, who won the US election, who won the sports game last night, did deposit XYZ happen on some other chain, cross-chain communications? Should this governance vote go through according to a set of rules? It actually ends up being the default language by which you can write generalized contracts. And that's something that I'll want to spend a bit more time talking about in a moment. So what I like to do is sort of look at the distribution of the types of questions you might ask an oracle. And in my mind, the distribution looks something like this, where it's a bit of a power law distribution with a fat head and then a long tail of the frequency of the different types of questions or requests you might ask an oracle system. And I think really today we're focused on the DeFi use case for oracles, where oracles are focused today on supporting mainly lending and credit protocols. And they need this fathead price data. They need the price of the top 50 cryptocurrencies. And that's worked, and things have been built on that. But my real view is that there's a lot of other stuff out there that we're not doing today, and I actually have the opinion that this is a much larger market. And so that's like kind of the one big point I want to leave you all with. It's that my opinion is that oracles today are only really being used for a small fraction of what they will be used for in the future. And I actually find this to be quite exciting. So backing up here, I think it's important to begin to differentiate between like the types of oracles that were being used or created. And I actually think we're at the position right now, it's sort of one analogy I use sometimes. Back in 2016, if you talked about a blockchain, you defaulted to thinking of a proof of work system. There was no other real design that people were really contemplating back then. And then things go along and you realize, oh wait, there's other ways we can build a blockchain system. We can do this proof of stake thing. We can do different forms of consensus mechanisms. I sort of think that's where we are with oracles today, where the general consensus is that you need a sort of price feed style oracle, what I call a price feed oracle, to be the thing that pushes data onto a blockchain. And I think that is a small section of the design space of what we can use oracle-like systems for. So to go in a bit more detail on what I call price feed oracles, these I look at kind of technically as systems that verify correctness in advance. A price feed oracle is going to say, hey, here's the answer, it's immutable, can't be changed. And they are these systems that regularly push data through a supposedly like decentralized consensus mechanism, and I think there's some debate there about how decentralized that is. But but they provide something really useful for all of the credit and lending protocols that have flourished in DeFi in the last couple years. The problems, of course, is that these types of Oracle systems are expensive to operate. You need to pay a lot of gas if you're going to push prices with any frequency, even on cheap blockchains. And that fundamentally makes them unscalable. You can't really use this type of system to ask any question, or certainly not to ask any question in a decentralized way. And I'd also argue that this design, it is inherently brittle. You can have price feed style oracles that do their job correctly, that push data onto a blockchain, but that API data itself could be wrong. And I think this is an understudied or underappreciated fact of some of the security risks in DeFi protocols today, where you really could have an Oracle system doing what it's supposed to do, but you just could have API data that's not accurate. And I think that's something that is kind of scary, to be honest. So my argument here, going back to where I think this gets interesting, I think Web3 needs a long-tail oracle. And I'll go back to this slide. We need an oracle for everything else. Web3 needs an oracle or a set of oracle systems that are going to give us these long-tail data inputs and answer the questions that aren't the top 50 cryptocurrency prices. And I think for that system to exist, we need three things. We need it to be able to verify any claim on a blockchain. We need it to be cheap to use, and importantly, with like a low overhead to run and operate. Call it sort of, another way of looking at it is permissionless and unstoppable. An operating team could go away and it still keeps doing its thing. And lastly, and this might be debatable, but in my opinion, this long-tail oracle also needs to access human judgment. And I say that because many of the types of questions or truths we want to ask this oracle system, I don't think there is API data for those questions. I don't think it's a type of thing that you can just go query some endpoint. And so I think this concept of having human judgment here is actually probably the coolest and most interesting aspect, where can we actually build a system that crowdsources truths from a network of human operators, at least at some level. So I'm biased here because it's what we're building, or what we built. But I think this optimistic oracle design is, in fact, the type of long-tail oracle that Web3 needs. And in kind of contrast to this price feed oracle, where things are correct in advance, to say, here's the price, it's correct, take it. An optimistic oracle flips it around and says, hey, let's propose a price and assume it to be true if it passes some challenge period without being disputed. And I think this type of design, it does in fact enable a lot of flexibility, where we can bring any verifiable state of the world on chain. The requirement here is simply that we have a network of proposers that exist to propose prices, as well as a network of disputers that will challenge them if they're incorrect. And this design is highly flexible and generalized to support sort of any type of data methodology. It has a really low cost to operate. You only need one honest disputer alive at any time or online at any time to keep these things honest. And I'd further add that it adds a really cool form of recourse that I think is otherwise missing from a lot of Oracle systems, where the dispute process itself can function as a sort of undo button if something does go wrong. So just to tell you guys what we're doing, what is UMA? We've done a lot of things in our past, but we are really focusing on this concept of being an optimistic oracle and trying to become a basic primitive that can provide and verify arbitrary data on chain. And we've been using this design pattern now for a couple years with well, I'll go into some of the examples we're using it in, but to secure markets and to secure smart contracts across Web3. And the whole idea here is that the OO itself can tell a blockchain, quote unquote, things about the world in a way that makes it into a sort of truth machine, which it is very cool that you can crowdsource truths from a network of actors on a blockchain. It's a pretty fun thing to build. And so what have we built? Things that have been built using our optimistic oracle include prediction markets like Polymarket. I'll go quickly through these, but prediction markets, things where you can bet on the outcome of events. DeFi insurance. There's a DeFi insurance protocol called Sherlock that uses the optimistic oracle as a final layer in their claims process. Optimistic governance is something that I'm going to spend a few minutes at the end of this talk talking about, a direction we're moving into. Cross-chain messaging. The panel was just talking about optimistic bridges. We've used our optimistic oracle. Our team has built our own bridge called a Cross. You guys should check it out. The site is cross.to.to. That functions as a very low cost, very secure way to bridge between EVM compatible chains. And it does this optimistically, which is pretty powerful. And we've also used this optimistic oracle design to build a number of sort of more outlandish or out there, interesting, bespoke synthetic tokens, including things like KPI options and success tokens, which you may have heard about. So just to put some names to some of those ideas, Polymarket is building prediction markets or information markets to let you bet on sports and elections and various outcomes. Sherlock, that the purple box in the middle, asks the question, was a protocol hacked? Is their claims process? Across is the green box on the right, which is using our oracle for hundreds of millions of cross-chain transactions. And then Shapeshift, with their Fox token, did a fundraise using success tokens secured by Optimistic Oracle. Boba uses them to run a mining program based on KPI options, which we think is pretty cool. So again, my point here was to try to convince you that I think our Oracle space is big and growing, and that there is a need for more types of designs. Worth spending a second talking about how this works. And we're time constrained, so I'm not going to go too deep. But like, what are the components that go into this optimistic design pattern? And we look at it as an optimistic oracle is primarily made of a set of pseudo-anonymous actors who are responsible for relaying these truths onto a blockchain because it is in their economic best interest. And so the system consists of three different types of actor. Requesters, these are the contracts that are asking for a bit of data. Proposers, people that are going to say, hey, here's what actually happened. And oftentimes those two entities are the same person. And then disputers, who have an economic incentive to say, wait, that's not right, if in fact a bad answer was proposed. And these are the actors in the game. The game itself is actually fairly simple, this escalation game. What gets more complicated is how do you resolve disputes if a dispute is triggered. That's something that I'll also very briefly touch on, but that's the second component you need in this system, some sort of dispute resolution process. You also need to document a methodology for how you will resolve what a truth is. And here's where stuff could get kind of philosophical, where you can ask, hey, what should a truth be? But generally speaking, we've kept it to fairly simple things that you can fairly easily verify. Like reasonable human beings can be like, hey, that's the answer, that's not the answer. And then lastly, we wrap this system with a set of economic guarantees that bound the cost of manipulating the system. So we can sit here and actually prove with math what it would cost to break or bribe or otherwise manipulate this design. And so I really should draw a better picture for this, but like walking through the flowchart here, this simple idea: someone requests a bit of data or a truth, somebody proposes it. As long as nobody challenges that proposal during a given challenge window, it's taken as true. That's our optimistic path. If there is a dispute, then that dispute gets escalated to a different system. In UMA, we call it our DVM, our data verification mechanism, which is a different bit of game theory where the UMA token holders vote on what the correct outcome is. But the dispute process itself is rare, and this is why it is an optimistic system. 99.99, I don't know, I think we're about 2 nines right now, but 99.99% of the time, requests go through with no dispute at all. And that's what keeps the system cheap and easy to operate, while also allowing it to be incredibly flexible with what we can support or answer. All right, so time. I wanted to give a bit of a preview of some of the stuff of where we're taking this idea, and this is just to begin to kind of like plant some seeds as to where I think Oracle usage is going to go in the coming years. And I think a big use case here is for DAO governance. So here's the idea. What if we were to publish the rules under which a DAO could be governed off-chain, and then reference those rules with an optimistic oracle such that anyone could propose an action to a DAO that will get executed as long as nobody disputes it? The optimistic oracle itself then just checks to say, hey, somebody's proposing this transaction, happens in the DAO treasury. Should we allow it? And if nobody says no during the dispute period, it goes through. And what we've done here is created a system where a DAO is able to be managed without multi-sigs, without a whole bunch of actors signing transactions. We've created a system where the actual holders themselves can validate optimistically whether it's being governed correctly. And this is something that, just to be clear, there's lots of great work that's happened in the space from Aragon and Snapshot and SafeSnap. We've built out a version of this that connects a Gnosis safe using their Zodiac framework to the UMA's optimistic oracle to allow snapshot votes to be seamlessly integrated. Snapshot vote happens, and then without any multi-sig action happening, if it passes a challenge period, it'll get executed by the Gnosis safe itself. But the point here is not just to integrate with Snapshot. The point here is that we can use this optimistic governance concept to allow a DAO to do all these functions that would otherwise create a lot of administrative work, require a lot of multi-sigs. One idea we talked about with some of the folks at Utopia Labs that are a DAO tooling company is this idea of optimistic expense management, where you could have a DAO that defines its expense policy for, say, coming to a conference, and allow anyone to submit their expense transactions optimistically and have them be approved with no action required, provided they weren't disputed by the optimistic oracle. And the whole concept here is we can use this design pattern to figure ways to write down the rules of a governance for the system and make it easy to interact with the DAO, again, without admin rights or multi-sigs. So we think this is a pretty cool way to get towards what I'll call generalized contracting, where you can write contracts that are bespoke, in this case specific to the DAO, without requiring points of centralization. And just to give you my sense of where this is going, I think one of the most powerful things that smart contract platforms can do is actually to invent a new form of contracting. instead of writing contracts with legal recourse like we do in the traditional world, we can write contracts on a blockchain. But writing a generalized contract on a blockchain requires us to know if things have happened, if obligations have been fulfilled. And many of those things happening consists of observations that you can't see on the blockchain itself. So my view is that this optimistic design pattern is painting the way or setting the framework or the infrastructure for us to be able to write arbitrary generalized contracts that could power all sorts of contracting agreements, bespoke or otherwise, between entities on blockchains. And I think that's going to be a pretty cool and pretty powerful place to be. So I think I'm about at time. My takeaways here, just to summarize this. Price feed oracles today, I think they're built for the fat head of price data. That's the top 50 cryptocurrency prices. I think we should be concerned that API data can be wrong, which can make some of these price feed oracles brittle. My view is that Web3 will require many more kinds of truths than just price data, and that optimistic oracles like UMA are well suited for this type of long-tail data. And then kind of most interestingly, it's actually my opinion that long-tail oracles, the market for them might actually be a lot larger than what price feed oracles today are doing with DeFi lending and credit protocols. And I think that this design pattern is well positioned to be an important primitive in this idea of generalized contracting, where we can use smart contracts to write more bespoke and advanced forms of agreements. Okay, I'm up on time because this is a group of Oracle nerds. I do want to say we're hiring, and if you guys are interested in working on cool Oracle problems, you should check us out. I don't know how much time we have left for questions,